Well, welcome back. Great to have you along on this Tuesday. I'm Scott Murray. This is David Hamilton, the founder and CEO of America's Future Series, and this is our America's Future Series National Security Pitch Day. Delighted to have each and every one of you here. I am going to, look, somebody popped up there a little prematurely, but that's who we're going to talk about. That was Gloria Chu, Ensign's University Program Director for the University of Hawaii at Manoa, to serve as the conduit between the Department of Defense and the University of Hawaii. Now, prior to Ensign, she worked at, and I hope I get this right, Gloria, you'll have to straighten me out if I don't, U.S. Indo-PACOM J9 Pacific Outreach. Is that it? Did I get it right?
Absolutely.
All right. And you're currently serving as an officer in the Hawaii Air National Guard. So we say thank you for your service, certainly. And can you tell us day to day kind of what do you get a chance to be a part of and what you do day to day?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. We are generating a network of innovators here at Ensign at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So we're really excited working with our students in the College of Engineering and other disciplines that are very talented and that have not been used in our national security spaces. So we're able to work with other military branches on the island and then be able to connect students to these problems and to allow them to work on these issues that the military is faced on a day-to-day basis. So it's really exciting to be able to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. We can't thank you enough. And Ensign is one of our title sponsors. So thank you for your support, certainly in that endeavor. But we're going to just turn it over to you. So take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to introduce Colonel Odie Van Opdorp, retired from the Marine Corps after 30 years of service as an infantry officer. He commanded Marine units at every level throughout his career and supported Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Eastern Exit, and Iraqi Freedom, as well as deployments to Okinawa, Korea, and Norway. He has held key staff billets within headquarters, Marines Corps, the United States Senate, the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, and the Joint Staff, and he served as a commanding officer of Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia. As a government senior executive, he most recently served as a Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy and Chief of Staff to the Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller.
Hey, Gloria, good afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a terrific honor and pleasure to be here this afternoon. Special thanks to Greg Lehman for providing me the opportunity to participate in the wrap up. And again, Gloria, thanks to you for the introduction. The plan for the closing session this afternoon is to focus on the requirements side of the innovation equation. For most of the day, we've heard a lot about ways to support the resourcing of innovation and the challenges associated with that. But paying small attention really to the capabilities that we're actually trying to develop and are interested in delivering to the warfighter and to senior decision makers. So this session will focus more on those organizations whose primary purpose is to identify innovative solutions to current future challenges, and then to find organizations that can deliver those capabilities in a timely fashion. Before we do that, we'll start with a scene setting pitch from retired Marine Lieutenant General Mike Dana. In full disclosure, General Dana is a fellow upstate New Yorker like myself, so it's always good to get together with him. But he's going to provide a historical perspective about the environment in which we find ourselves operating in today. He'll also provide some emerging keys to finding success along the path of that innovation. Following General Dana, I'll take the time to provide brief introductions of each of our other contributors that you can see on the screen. They are Dr. Casey Purley, Colonel Alex Goldberg, and Captain Ben Van Buskirk. And when I introduce them after General Dana, I'll give them an opportunity to describe a little bit about the organizations that they represent today. So with that, I got to tell you, it's as a mentor and a teacher of mine, it's a pleasure for me to be able to introduce Lieutenant General Mike Dana. He's a career Marine with 37 years of experience, during which time he's deployed 10 times across the globe in support of humanitarian, peacekeeping, and combat operations as a recognized logistics professional. As a lieutenant general, he served as the deputy commandant for our installations in logistics department as well as the director of the Marine Corps staff. But in his capacity as the director or the head of INL, he was a tremendous advocate for leveraging AI and machine learning developments to support Marine Corps initiatives. At INL, he formed the next generation logistics team, NextLog, that was focused exclusively on innovation. This team was instrumental in the fielding of additive manufacturing capabilities into the Marine Corps. NextLog also spearheaded experimentation with unmanned air, sea, and land logistics delivery platforms. This team was the incubator for the first ever Marine Corps Innovation Challenge, an event that provided Marines around the world a venue to express their ideas and develop solutions for tough logistics problems. NextLog made inroads in the private sector to capture best practices in data analytics, predictive maintenance, and optimization of supply chains. General Dana is well known throughout the Marine Corps community as a strategic thinker, innovator, voracious reader, and at the end of the day, a Marine's Marine. Lieutenant General Dana, sir, it's great to see you again, and over to you.
Thanks, Odie. Speaking of books, I love your library. That's great in the background. Hey, for everybody, I'm sorry I dropped off. I was going to talk about cyber later, and it happened to me a minute ago as I dropped off the net. But I look forward to providing some thoughts to you today and really look forward to feedback. And no PowerPoint slides. That's the good news, because after a long and very intense conference, you don't want PowerPoint. That's always bad. I'm just going to give you some thoughts on future war and what I call war in the fourth industrial revolution, which I think we're in right now. But I think past is prologue. And some folks that I've talked to, they say, hey, you can't predict the future. I mean, it's never an exact science. But I beg to differ, because if you look at history, and specifically two authors, they actually predicted what would happen in World War I and World War II. So the first one is Ivan Bloch, Polish by birth, very rich, very smart, owns steel mills, railroads in Europe. And in 1898, he writes a book, The Future of War. And in that, he predicts everything that's going to happen in World War I. The power of defense, the killing power of artillery and machine guns, the difficulty of command and control in large formations in a dispersed battlefield. He gets everything right. The only thing he gets wrong is he said mankind would never be so foolish to march to folly and take those kind of casualties. And of course, in 1914, unfortunately, we prove him wrong. Then another author by the name of Hector Bywater, he's British by birth, New York Herald Tribune writer, newspaper man, and he writes a book in 1925 called War in the Pacific. And he predicts pretty much everything that's going to happen in the Pacific in World War II. Impact of carrier aviation, island hopping campaign, talks about how the Japanese will attack. He said the Philippines actually occurred in Pearl Harbor. His writings are so impactful that military planners on both the Japanese and the American side, cite his book and take lessons from that for the future next fight. The last person I'm going to talk about real quick, and it's not a person that predicts the future, but he made our future happen, and that's Vannevar Bush. And he's FDR's science guy, and he is absolutely a national asset for us. MIT graduate, founder of Raytheon. He's what I call the Kevin Bacon of technological integration, because there's no more than 6 degrees of separation between him and all the major programs in World War II. Atomic bomb, B-29, radar, sonar, proximity fuses. I mean, his fingerprints are all over everything. Writes a good book, Modern Arms and Free Men, and talks about how he was able to be impactful in that conflict. And what I'd argue today is that Mr. Gertz in the Navy and Dr. Roper, when he was with the Air Force, they have the same DNA as Vannevar Bush. They do. I mean, they're change agents. I just think the machine today, it's tough to move things forward. It'd be interesting to see if you brought him, Bush, to the future, how he would fare. The other thing I want to cover real quick is our way of war is a reflection of our economy and what industrial revolution we're in. And just real quick, the 4 industrial revolutions, the first one's in the early 1800s, textile industry, steam powered. Steam engines were originally to pull water out of mines, but then they're used to create, railroads, and that transforms transportation in Europe and the United States. So it's fantastic capabilities are emerging there in the 1800s. Then there's the second industrial revolution. Let's take that from Civil War to about World War II. And this is the age of the internal combustion engine, Ford's mass assembly line, and Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts. And then electricity, which doesn't get a lot of fanfare, but just think about today, if we hadn't had electricity and all the things it allows us to do today, we'd be back 100 years in history, so to speak. Third industrial revolution, about the late 1960s, late Vietnam era. It's the beginning of the World Wide Web. It's information age, semiconductors, automation, robotics. All these things are being emerged on the scene. And then fourth industrial revolution, there's Naval Postgraduate School tracks 8 key emerging technologies, but things like additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence and machine learning, quantum computing, 5G, hypersonics. And I believe that though history sometime, well, like Mark Twain says, doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. There's a lot of the things from past conflict will happen in the next conflict, but some of these emerging technologies to me have incredible promise and incredible peril at the same time. More on that in a minute. So what's the American way of war? I would say that we've always been very good at strategic mobility and operational agility. Tactical end, we've been very good too, but the Japanese were very tenacious, the Germans were very ingenious. But in terms of the operational and strategic level, we can move mass and move it fast. So 3 quick examples. Civil War, there's a corps, the 23rd Corps, that's 15,000 strong. Okay, it takes 19 days to move them from an attack in 1864 in Tennessee to an attack on Wilmington. That's before the interstate system, Eisenhower interstate system, before strategic airlift. We moved that many folks and all their gear in 19 days. World War I, Germans think it's going to take us 2 years to move 1 million men. We move 1 million the first year, 2 million by Armistice Day. World War II, there's a book, Arsenal of Democracy, great read, where it talks about how we literally are the arsenal of democracy. 66%, 2/3 of the war material in that conflict produced for the Allies, produced by us, the United States. 88,000 tanks, 303,000 aircraft, 2.4 million vehicles, 4 billion rounds of ammunition. That's not a made up number. It's a lot of ammo. I'm a logistician. That's a lot of ammo. Then 5,000 ships, black and gray bottom, that move 2/3 of the 16 million we put in uniform to a 2-front war. I mean, we can move mass. So I think the challenge is for us today, we know what we're good at. We have a force that's a blend of at least 3 of the Industrial Revolution, second, third, and fourth. And that makes it complicated for folks like logisticians to support because it's a hybrid. I don't mean hybrid warfare, but it's a hybrid machine. And then some of the systems that we've had, we've made them heavier, more complex, more energy intensive, harder to maintain. And that's the kind of the stew that we're dealing with in terms of all these different platforms on how to support them in the future fight. So how do we fight? Where? And this was mentioned in the moniker for your event today, but there's this World War II, we fought primarily in the sea, air, and land domains, and the sea had a really important subsea component. You look to the future, you're going to add space and cyber, which in my opinion will be the absolute decisive domains of future war, because all of our connectivity, our command and control, our systems are very much reliant on either terrestrial-based communication data systems or space-based. Chinese are, I think it was in 2017, they knocked the satellite out. I mean, if you took out our satellites and our ability to communicate, and terrestrially, okay, we're going to be fighting with sticks and stones, and I think it's going to be that impactful. The other 2 domains are cognitive and time, which the purists tell me, hey, you're not adhering to doctrine; those aren't real domains. Bear with me for today. If we're at a bar, I buy you a beer to go with me on this part of the discussion. But I would say the cognitive domain, man's ability to fight and process all the information on the modern battlefield, because the battle occurs here. What commanders do in terms of decision making, I think there's so much information today on the modern battlefield. That's a tough domain to fight through. And then time with hypersonics, it compresses time and decision time for leaders on the battlefield. And I think that's a big challenge. So I'm going to talk about only 3 of the 8 emerging technologies because I want to leave time for my other panel members. I don't want them coming after me after this pitch. But really important, I think that the most important 3, and I'll admit to you that I have a logistician's bias when I say these. My first one is additive manufacturing and 3D printing, which has the promise of bringing the factory closer to the foxhole. Because for us in history, it's been the factory in the United States, then we shipped it across the globe to where it had to go. But in the future, you could have 3D printing capability. And I think this just happened in Austin, Texas a few months ago, where they printed a building, a structure. Okay, you can print food. I've tasted it, it's terrible, but I'm sure it'll get better. Okay, more importantly, you can print repair parts. And then in the Marine Corps, and Odie alluded to this, is we had the ability at the very pointy end in an infantry battalion in the back of a Humvee to have a 3D printer that would print nibblers, which are little handheld drones that at the pointy end, they're doing manufacturing. So I think it's actually limitless what you can do with additive manufacturing, 3D printing, and technology is getting better and better. Next is unmanned platforms, sea, subsea, air, and land. And the thing is, I drive an 84 Chevy truck, which means in a cyber attack, I'm good, you're not. And why I'm bringing that up is with unmanned platforms, you can have a lot of 84 Chevy trucks, not that expensive, unmanned. If they're carrying a logistics load and they get shot down, it's not the end of the day. It's not good, but you're not losing human life, which is the most important thing. Plus, you can mask those systems. I think, and that's the promise of unmanned. I think the peril of unmanned, and everybody knows this on the net, is if you weaponize those platforms, and then if, let's say you have F-35 sitting in an airfield, ships sitting pierside or in a harbor, you literally, if you watch the Dr. Roper 60 Minutes episode, where he launches, I think it was a couple hundred drones out of the F-18, they disaggregate and then they aggregate and hit the target. And he said in that 60 Minutes that that technology was as impactful as nuclear weapons. I don't think that's hyperbole. I mean, I think he's got a really good point. Unless we come up with technology that can defeat that kind of threat. So then with artificial intelligence, next one, last one, artificial intelligence, machine learning is, again, with all of that information, how to collect it, collate it, analyze it, distill it down into actionable knowledge. How do we do that? Well, I think machines can help. An example I'll use is Kasparov, whose book, Deep Thinking, is really a recommended read, because what he talks about is, hey, I know I'm the best chess player in the world. I was beat by Deep Blue. And in fact, when he was beat by Deep Blue, he thought IBM cheated. I mean, he went on that track for a while, and then he finally realized Deep Blue beat him fair and square. And he came to epiphany and said, if I'm really good and the machine's really good, me and the machine together are absolutely unstoppable. And that's what I think about the challenge of future war is. And excuse, this is going to be a little bit coarse, but in history, mankind has always used machines to kill other humans. But now with the advances in technology, I believe that, machines are going to fight machines at a speed, a machine speed, that a human, the cognitive part of it, maybe won't be able to keep up. And there's a book, A Soldier of One, where he talks about this, that, hey, where does the human decision-making element get interjected in that to make sure that the human's in control of the machine and the machine's not running the fight? Food for thought. Last topic I've got, in about 30 seconds, then I'll turn it over to the rest of the team, is that the Army coined a term a couple of years ago, multi-domain operations, and now it's joint domain command and control. But as you look at all the various domains that we fight in with these new emerging technologies, I think for industry, what we owe you, and folks do this in a military way, but I think it needs to be packaged for industry, is looking at all the different domains, the characteristics of the domains, their strengths, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, how you can leverage them, how you can protect them, and looking for two things. You're looking for seams, and you're looking for interdependencies. Because the enemy, like Clausewitz always points out, and even Sun Tzu, is that enemy will show up at the worst time at the worst place for the worst effect. And it'll always be in that seam or attacking that interdependency or that nodal point. But I'm not talking 8th Air Force bombing Schweinfurt ball bearings. Hey, it didn't work. That was then. It's different today because the systems are so interconnected that there's a lot of points of failure. And I think if you look at these through the various operational lenses of C4ISR, fires, maneuver, logistics, intelligence, and each domain, and you map that out on a whiteboard, you would go, okay, how do I protect that? What tools do I need to fight in that environment? So that's all I have today, because I promised no PowerPoint. I think I kept it to 10 or 11 minutes. And Odie, back to you for the rest of the team. Thanks for the time to talk to you today.
Yep. All right, sir. Thanks very much. Terrific pitch, and certainly a lot to think about. Now it's my pleasure to begin to introduce our other conversationalists this afternoon. First, taking it from big organization to smaller, we'll go to Colonel Alex Stoickey Goldberg from the Defense Innovation Unit. Alex is a graduate of UCLA and an experienced pilot, both manned and unmanned, for the Air Force. He started as an F-16 pilot and then became an MQ-1 pilot, and from there an MQ-1 and MQ-9 instructor pilot. For the past 3 years, he's built a tremendous resume in the innovation community as a fellow, first at Ensign and then at DARPA. Prior to his current position, Alex served as the director for the Texas Military Department Joint Innovation Unit. And currently he serves as the Joint Technology Acquisition Innovation Officer at DIU. Alex, over to you for an introduction of DIU and what you and your organization hope to contribute to the innovation challenge.
No, appreciate it, sir. And General Dana, that's a hard act to follow. So no, love that perspective that you brought to the table. And so I think from what I wanted to be able to share is I often get asked about the whole innovation ecosystem that has just emerged in the last few years. What is the problem that the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, at the time 5 years ago was trying to solve, by which he created the Defense Innovation Unit? Why did the Army Futures Command reorg for the very first time in 75 years? Not even the Vietnam War, caused them to reorg. Why did the Secretary of the Navy create, Naval X, and the Secretary of the Air Force created AFWERX? General Hyten a couple of years ago had expressed the thing that keeps him up at night when he was the Stratcom commander, right? In charge of all the nuclear weapons, from bombers and to missiles. And he goes, you know what keeps me up at night? It is not Russia. It's not China. It's not North Korea or Iran. What keeps him up at night is, as a nation, he fears that we've lost the ability to go fast. And as you talked about, General Dana, that at the end of the day, there are near peer competitors that are moving faster than us in space, in hypersonics, and now in taking commercial technology and fielding it faster than we are. All of the stuff that you had talked about in World War I and World War II, back in the day in the 50s, for every $1 in research and development we had, industry maybe had 50 cents. Now for every $1 in research and development we have, it's the Googles, the Apples, the venture capital private equity community that now have $11. And when you talk about artificial intelligence, it's like $100 to 1. Right? What works today is not necessarily going to work tomorrow. All of the great innovations from whether you talk about stealth technology, internet, literally everything in your phone, from mouse to LCD screens to microelectronics, were all developed out of our service labs or DARPA. And now that's not the case. And so how do we inspire? How do we engage? How do we support, right, the commercial industry that has this dual use technology? And it's very hard to think of things that don't have a dual use application. I mean, they're creating hypersonic, vehicles for transportation of people, right? And the new Concorde, taking someone from China, to, New York in an hour and a half. So these kind of things, this new reality of how do we, right, leverage what is happening on the commercial sector to help us move faster. And so there's two aspects of it. One is the technology. Yes, we need to be able to keep this technological pace, because what is happening with those near peer competitors? In the last 20 years of continual combat, focus more on the coin operation, right? The counterinsurgency extremists. Let's say China. China over the last 10 years has increased their budget by 10x. By 2030, they will have parity with our military. 40% of all STEM scientists, right, will originate from China. Only 3.6% will come from the United States. Right, so when you look at their GDP, it'll be larger. Their defense budget will be larger. Their R&D budget will be larger. And so what works today will not necessarily work in the future. So how do we leverage, right, and tap into our academia and our industry and make it easier for them to help us, right, serve alongside us? And look, the DoD, the bureaucracy is strong, right? And another one of my mentors, a long time ago, Lieutenant General Quast, he was the commander of Air Education Training Command. He had talked about, look, there's nothing like wrong about bureaucracy per se, and that it perpetuates what works. We create these processes, we streamline it, we create these efficiencies. The challenge is when what works no longer works, it is really hard to move, right? And that is the concept. Look, it took only about 15 months to build the Pentagon. I'm not exactly sure we could agree on the size of the negotiating table in 15 months, right? So this is all about speed and contributing in ways not previously seen, and building a relationship with the community. This is a whole of community. This is a whole of state. This is a whole of nation approach. 20% of all venture capital is coming from China and Russia. They're coming into our centers of gravity, right? The Silicon Valley, the Boston, right? And now the Texas corridor, right? Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. And they're buying our technology. And I've had thousands of hours in combat. They're using it against us. And you wouldn't, and I'm sure Casey's the same way. We have a lot of threat intel. And so we understand what is happening in the business community, and we have these conversations with these companies that Belgium company that is maybe signing that check for that VC money is actually coming from a trust fund, and all of the money is coming from the Chinese Ministry of Defense. Those people that you're actually hiring, right, from that university is actually a part of their 1,000 Talents program, and they're actually on the payroll for the Chinese Ministry of Defense. These are things that conceptually most people within civil society are just not aware of. I was not aware of it. And that's why DIU exists, right? That's why a lot of these innovation units, how do we move faster? How do we change the culture, right? Because it's not just about showcasing, here's a teleportation device, right? From the military, we go, we want a faster horse. And the concept is, maybe there's a tank, maybe there's an aircraft, maybe there's a hypersonic space vehicle that you had not thought of. And so how do we tap into all the brain power that is within our civil society, within our country, and our coalition partners to help us in that effort? Getting away from this concept of, this no because mindset, right? That's compliance driven. No, because we just haven't done it that way before. No, because, the regulation says we can't. And get to this problem solving, never rest in our laurels. How do we get to yes? Morally, legally, ethically, but how do we get to yes? Look, in the next combat, right, as you talked about, General Dana, we're not going to have necessarily complete command and control. And if we tell our airmen and soldiers and seamen and guardians and all the other service branches how to do everything, then right in peacetime, how are we going to expect them to adapt and overcome and persevere and win nonetheless in highly contested combat? This is about lethality. This is about readiness. This is about, right, leveraging this technology to uplift the human condition and ensure peace and prosperity, right? Winning is, right, if never a shot is fired, right? That is the concept that we're trying to come from. And it's not just where civil society just thinks what they see in movies and in video games. We live in the communities we serve, right? Nobody wants to go to war. The vast majority is we're helping with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, right? The hurricanes, the COVID operations, civil unrest, right? To ensure, peace and prosperity. These are the things that we are really focusing on. And how can we help companies who maybe there are tons of markets, those technologies that you just talked about, that there are reasons why they are not in civil society. Maybe because of security, privacy, safety, whether it's small drones, whether it's urban air mobility, right? Whether it's, look, even construction scale additive manufacturing, which you just talked about, 3D printing buildings. To ensure that safety, the DoD can be the first customer. And we can prove out that security and that safety, just like planes. No one wanted to use a plane. We used it in World War I. Everyone's like, hey, the airline industry and everything, blossomed from there. That can create trillions of dollars of economic impact, millions of jobs. And so that is an area that we're trying to build that relationship that we had back in the day. But unlike back in the day where we had all the money and we were developing all the technology, we really have to build those relationships with our academia and our, industry partners that we have not been before. And so bottom line, that's where DIU comes in. Building that relationships to Silicon Valley, which is currently where I'm at right now, visiting here for the week, but normally I'm in Austin. And how do we take advantage of what's happening in Boston, in Austin, down in DC area, and what is happening in Silicon Valley, and find those technologies. Let these companies know, let these VCs know, let these private equities, know that we're going to hold their hand. And it's not just us, but for our perspective, we're helping scale across the services. Army Applications Lab is doing great work. Naval X is doing great work. AFWorks is doing great work and focusing on their service. But DIU as a strategic organization, creating strategic, innovation doctrine, helping change policy and colors of money and reducing the bureaucracy on cybersecurity and other ways to make it easier to work with the DoD. Other ways that we can get more non-dilutive equity and work with our congressional, staff delegates of how we can move faster. So that's it. I mean, being able to come to www.diu.mil. We have solicitations. We make it relatively easy. It's a 15-page slide deck to be able to apply to our stuff. And we get stuff on contract within 90 days and off to the races we go. And we work with both the defense customer that's trying to solve that problem and introducing them to technology that they didn't even know exists. 3D printing buildings. That's a thing. It's a thing, right? And you could do it cheaper, faster, and better than anything else. And that's actually a company, Icon, that is in Austin that I have been working with and is a part of a DIU portfolio. We have built, HIMARS, right, for our, we have vehicles to be able to create protection facilities just right there downrange, all the way to building barracks. And currently at Camp Swift, which is a base just 20 minutes to the east of Austin, we're building the largest building in North America. It's a barrack, and it's going to be the nicest barracks in the entire Army, which is, coming from an Air Force personnel, I get it, it's a relatively low barrier within the Army to meet that. But those are the kinds of technologies around dual use: artificial intelligence, autonomy, cyber, space, human systems, right? Bio, and lastly, now advanced energy and material. So happy to take this discussion in anywhere the audience wants to take it, but wanted to piggyback on what Lieutenant General Dana had talked about, from where we were to the new reality that exists today, and how we need to work collectively to be able to help move us faster, to be able to compete with when we look in the rearview mirror. That is why our director is now got nominated, right, to be the office under the Undersecretary of Defense for all of acquisition and sustainment. The Biden administration understands it's about China, it's COVID, it's about climate, energy resiliency, and water resiliency. It's about moving faster. And now it's about taking everything that I just talked about in the innovation ecosystem that's been happening over the last 5 years, and it's time to scale if we're going to be able to meet that future need, that future challenge. So off to you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Next, I'd like to turn to Dr. Casey Perley from the Army's Application Lab. Dr. Perley's an Army biodefense scientist with a decade of experience studying infectious diseases, somewhat prescient, that threaten U.S. soldiers and the public. She spent over 3,000 hours studying deadly pathogens and high contamination facilities. I think they make movies about that. And she has extensive knowledge of and experience with dual use research of concern. She also has expertise in early stage vaccine design and evaluation through phase 2 clinical trials. Her most recent work as the Director of Insights and Analysis for the Army Applications Lab focuses on identifying, assessing, and rapidly transitioning disruptive technologies into the Army. A bit of an underachiever, Casey received her bachelor's degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry from Yale University, and her PhD in molecular genetics and microbiology from Duke University. Casey, well done to you. I think that in some of my research, I also gleaned that you may be an individual that's mastered the harp. So with that, over to you.
Thank you for that great introduction. And yes, all of that is true. I do play harp in orchestras in my spare time. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. 2 incredibly hard acts to follow. But I want to start by seizing on something that Stoickey said, which is that if you were to ask the Army, and I'm not just going to pick on the Army, but any service, how to build a better horse, they would tell you how to build a better horse. They would not go think about, do I need a tank? Do I need a hypersonic vehicle, right? And that's really where Army Application Lab comes in. We recognize that the Army, and even our defense primes, who have a critical role to play in our nation's defense infrastructure, don't have a monopoly on ideas. And if we really want to get the best technology to our soldiers, we've got to turn to companies who maybe don't know they have technology of value to the Army, or who've never considered working with the DoD before. So to do that, we spent about 2 years asking everybody we could think of, venture capitalists, aggregators, accelerators, companies, chambers of commerce, what their barriers to entry were in working with the DoD. Why did they not want to work with us? And I think it was a little therapeutic for them, because there was a chance to talk about all the problems that they had. And we were really able to distill it down to 3 things, which were access, transparency, and, as Stoickey alluded to, speed to capital. So when we talk about access, AAL, we like to solve problems like DIU. We go out, we find problems, we align stakeholders. These include the modernizers in the Army, who are our cross-functional teams, and our acquirers, who are the PMs, the ASALT side of the house, or the people who buy things. And we line them all up on a problem, and the first thing we do is we give our companies access to the end user. And a really great story, and why I wanted to bring up that horse analogy, is we took 6 companies out to Fort Bliss to see a field artillery battery fire live, because we were working on an autonomous resupply problem. And I think in all of our hearts of hearts, we're like, we know what we're going to get. We're going to get a bunch of little tracked robots that run around the battlefield that have artillery shells on the top. Like, I mean, industry, show us what you got, but we know the solution. We took these companies out and they stood there. And it's like the one day a year it rains at Fort Bliss, right? And the sergeant's standing outside trying to fill out some paperwork by hand, and the ink's running and the paper's disintegrating. And this company leans over and goes, you know, we could make an app for that. You wouldn't need paper. And it was this incredible aha moment because the company had pointed out a problem the Army didn't know it had. And it had pointed out that this process we had used for probably 100 years was really outdated. And we weren't even thinking about modernizing it. So that is the benefit of access. And that is the benefit of bringing in these companies that have such diverse perspectives. Because once again, we'd have thought we'd got tracked robots. Instead, we got some ammunition management tools. And that company has been able to grow its business by 30%. It's been able to hire 30% additional staff by working with the DoD. They're on their second contract. So it's been an incredibly beneficial arrangement, right, for both us and the company. When we talk about transparency, what does that mean? It means showing companies the return on investment for their time and showing them the pathway to long-term revenue, right? So that is aligning those modernizers and acquirers up front. It's also meeting them where they're at, right? Like companies don't go on beta.sam to find government opportunities. It's no offense to BetaSam, it's not the most navigable website. And unless you're actively searching for, DoD or government contacts, you're not going to be there. So we operate on social media. We do webinars. We host Ask Me Anythings to really try to penetrate into a community that might not be thinking about working with us. And we play translator as well, right? Translate Army into commercial world and back. And lastly, speed to capital. Look, we know working with the government takes time, and even getting on contract isn't the only barrier. Most government contracts, sort of in the R&D realm where we work, you're paid based on time. So take your total contract value, divide it by your period of performance, and at the end of the first month, invoice for 1/6 the amount of your contract if it's a 6-month contract. Then it takes another 2 to 4 weeks to get paid. And on average, it probably took you 9 months to get on contract to start. And that is just not gonna work if a company has limited runway. So we were able in our Fire Faster project, which is working with the Long Range Precision Fire Cross-Functional Team and PM Self-Propelled Howitzer on how to make the Paladin fire faster, we were able to get 15 companies on contract within 30 days of solicitation close. Companies were notified 6 days after solicitation close if they'd been accepted or not, and they could invoice for their first payment 39 days after that solicitation close, so right after the first week, because we moved to a deliverable-based payment scale. And that first deliverable was worth $100,000 or half their contract, so that the companies weren't paying out of pocket to work with the DoD. So our goal in reducing these barriers to entry is to find solutions like that, fire faster technology or that autonomous resupply technology that I mentioned. It's all about allowing commercial innovators to bring their unique perspective to the Army problems and to give them really wide left and right limits. Give them a problem and not a requirements document so that they can truly bring their ideas and their experience to bear on our problems. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and super excited for questions and seeing where the discussion leads us.
Okay, Dr. Perley, thanks very much for that. And one thing that I'll throw in for my previous most recent experience in the comptroller's office is that one of the things that we strive to do during the whole COVID crisis from a money perspective, and now we're talking about the Defense Finance and Accounting Service who pays all of our bills, was to find a way to speed the payout of invoices and work performed, and combination between all the different working capital funds and DFAST and the processes in place, and also creating authorities for primes to speed capital quicker to subprimes that are doing work for them. So one of those things that we hopefully bring forward from lessons learned is a way to get money out of the Treasury and into our the folks that can use it and that are using it much more quickly.
Absolutely. And I'll also add that the way you get paid in the government is through this horrible software called wide area workflow. And and I call it horrible, and maybe that's a bad word on my part, but it's not intuitive, right? If you've never used it before, it's very hard to learn. And you don't often have the ability to get a non-traditional company on the phone with somebody that knows how to use it, that can help them walk through how to enter their invoice solely so they can get paid. So we're trying to reduce those barriers as well, really just make sure that it's as easy as possible for these companies to get paid for the work they're doing.
Yeah, the defense business systems environment is an area that is in desperate need of innovation, but that's another conversation. So last but not least, we have Captain Ben Nuts Van Buskirk from Naval X. He's a career naval officer and an H-60 pilot. And over the course of his 20-plus year active duty career, following graduation from the University of Arizona, Ben's demonstrated the ability time and again to establish and lead diverse organizations from small special operations units to large aircraft carrier-based squadrons. As a Navy commander, he commanded Helicopter C Combat Squadron 12 out of Yokohama, Japan. Nuts has also recently served as a Secretary of Defense Fellow with VMware, where he focused on AI, machine learning, and the Internet of Things, among other topics. He also played an integral part in the stand-up of the OPNAV staff N7 Strategic Warfighter Innovation Cell. And currently he serves as the Director of Naval X within the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research, Development, and Acquisition. So Nuts, over to you to talk about all the great work that Naval X does for our sailors and Marines.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll also thank everyone for being here. And I do mean it because I learned as a fellow how that there are a lot of opportunities of folks to do business with, and to choose to do business with us is pretty patriotic, because it was really eye-opening when I learned just how much more work it is. And so, as the other panelists said, I just think a huge role for us is to understand we're a partner, and it's about being a guide to navigate the system. Because I can't tell you how many times I had somebody that was building a great product, some of which have since gone public and doing really well or been acquired, but said, hey, I'd love to work with you, but I don't even know where to start. And like I said, as soon as you go to the SAM's website, and it's not something you can do alone. So at least on behalf of Naval X, and I think the rest would agree, that we're here to be with you through the journey. I think it's a partnership. And I think an attitude of the military folks in general in uniform need to understand it really is a partnership. And I know sometimes folks will have an adversarial or we don't trust you relationship with industry. And I just think, it's our job to make these relationships better. But I'll just talk a little about it's been 4 weeks since I've been in the seat at Naval X. And so I'll go over some of the history and where I want to take the organization. So Naval X was founded really only about less than 2 years ago by Secretary Gertz, once again a visionary. And his reason for founding it was we have too many silos in our ecosystem. Nobody talks to each other. It's just not in our culture. We need to figure out a way to break down these silos, and we also need to figure out a way to move faster. And then lastly, we got to figure out a way to bring in this external R&D, as we've already talked about. There's much more R&D going on outside the government than in the government. And so what I'll do is cover really what our mission and vision is, some of our lines of effort, and then we'll go into questions. So really, what is the mission of Naval X? It's really three-tiered. One is to guide naval stakeholders to rapidly deliver capability to the warfighter. In the end, all of our job is to deliver capability, and we can't forget that. The second is service a platform that connects those naval needs and challenges with expert solution providers across industry, academia, and DoD. All right, we need to connect all those folks to solve our problems. To include, there's a question back there about folks in the fleet. Having the folks in the fleet as part of this process has to be there from the beginning. And in the Navy in particular, and I hear it across all the forums I'm in and talking to folks, is a lot of times that fleet sailor doesn't get that opportunity to really touch and influence the things we're working on. And a huge goal of mine is to really give those folks at the edge an opportunity to impact what we're doing here in Washington. And then third is encourage culture change across the Navy that makes us and the Marine Corps into a more agile, learning, and adaptable organization. So my vision, and this is aspirational, is really to inspire, empower, and connect the naval workforce with the defense ecosystem partners to iteratively deliver high impact capabilities on time, every time. And that's where we want to take the Navy. And so I'll cover just a few of our lines of effort that support that. One of them is tech bridges, all right? And that was the first major initiative of Naval X. And this is where we set up in collaboration with, or co-located with our warfighting labs, is essentially, think of it as a shop place that's regionally distributed around the country where we can be open to doing business with the Navy, all right? And what we love about it is we share our problems with these tech bridge ecosystems so that then you guys can come in as industry and say, how can what I have help solve your problem? And what I think is exciting about that too is it also allows a place where folks in the fleet can go and get engaged with the R&D ecosystem. As a career aviator, like I said, I never had any engagement with the R&D ecosystem other than an occasional visit by the folks from the Systems Command telling us the new stuff they're going to put on our aircraft. But our tech bridges are located in addition, not just at the warfare sending labs, but these labs are in fleet concentration areas. So we're working on things where, say, we have, I've told my folks that are in the squadrons, go over to the tech bridge and see what they're working on and get them involved. And the tech bridges can then go over to the seawall and get those end users. So in the same physical location, you can get end users, you can get industry and engineers with this phone call or Zoom call away from us back here at headquarters to really have those communications with the folks in the Pentagon. As we are uniquely positioned that I report directly to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, but I also have a dotted line in my chain of command to the Chief of Naval Research, and I come here from the OPNAV staff, so I have a dotted line to the OPNAV staff. So we can really solve these problems together. The other one, other than tech bridges, is we have our Centers for Adaptive Warfighting, which is where we take really modern industrial business processes. I'm thinking things like Scrum, Lean, human-centered design and design thinking, and we abstract the core ideas of those, and we go out and teach those to our folks in the field and to our warfare centers. It's part of this driving cultural change. What's exciting for me is it's not just about setting up these, we call them training nodes, around really all over the world. We just set up one in Alaska, and we have one in Okinawa. And of course in CONUS, but it's also a way to say how to get folks to share information. Say we really are getting huge pull from our folks at the edge, our warfighters on, I love Scrum. Scrum works really well in a squadron environment, in an operational environment. How do we get them to share their best practices with each other? And then how do we share our problems that we're working on either at the Corps here at Naval X or at our tech bridges and go, hey, I've got this problem, folks, Marines in Okinawa. You give a motivated sergeant in the Marines and say, I've got this big problem. Can you see if you can figure something out? You're going to get some really great inputs. And it's a way to really link the warfighter with what's going on in industry and with what's going on in the requirement side. We also work on our digital agility, which is, digital agility has been a huge issue. We talked about software and the DoD. All right, so we have a line of effort on how can we go and work with the Digital Transformation Office and the Digital Warfare Office and with the rest of the folks in the ecosystem from DIU to AFWorks to Army Futures on what are the best tools we have out there, work with industry, and figure out a way to get those in the hands of the folks that need them. And last is workforce agility, and I'll say that's where we go out and we actually do one-on-one sessions with clients within the Navy and say, we just have a problem, help us do some curation, and we go and do that. So really, those are the main lines of effort we have at Naval X, and really the last thing I'll go over before we go to questions is, so what? How do we get capability? So our model that we're using is the basis is a pyramid. The basis is the network. All right, we have to be interconnected with the smartest folks from industry, academia, and DoD, and then develop relationships and partnerships. And it's not transactional, it doesn't go with the job, but really build a relationship to do business with. And then we go and use our pipeline. And we really approach this as really an entrepreneurial mindset. I learned it at Harvard Business School's entrepreneurship program, and most schools teach it the same, is it's instead of saying we have a requirement. We're going to do a $1 billion program of record. It's what we have is we have an idea. We have a high level problem that needs to be solved that's been directed by the OpNav staff. Let's put together, as they say in business school, a deal. We look at people, opportunity and context, and put together an experiment of folks at the right people, all right, with the right stakeholders at the right level to do some experimentation, which is and not expensive experimentation. Ask for the amount we need, and then see what results come, and then iterate and learn. And that's where we want to go with this: is use our pipeline to do that, and that's the way to deliver capability. It's find that space for iterative experimentation within the budgets we have. And it's, a lot of folks will say, well, the problem is an org structure problem. All right, and I'd say that's probably true. The PBIS process hasn't been significantly reformed in decades. So I do think there's a place for organizational reform, but what we want to do is go, hey, what can we do within the context of what we have in the laws that we have to really move the needle, do some experimentation, which is really the model that everyone in industry uses. You don't know exactly what you have when you don't write a requirement for it when you're a seed level or Series 1 company, right? Or Series A, excuse me, or in venture funding. It's let's do experimentation with some ideas, with the core being what are the most important problems to address. So instead of developing things based on a requirement of something we know, it's what is the realm of possible that this technology might be able to deliver. Do some experimentation with the right folks, and then see where it goes. So I really appreciate you having me here, and look forward to the questions.
Hey, great, Ben. And to all of you, great scene setter for the continuing the discussion. So I think that in preparation for this, I was doing some work, and I found myself eventually at the end of the day scrolling around on Facebook, and I came across a friend of mine who's a commander of a unit out on the West Coast, and she was presenting a $500 check to a Marine corporal, Corporal Kim. And the check was essentially part of an innovation award program that she executed in this unit. And Corporal Kim was getting it because during a major exercise, Corporal Kim had devised a way to better track different units and activities in a combat operations cell in support of the larger unit. And so I got to thinking on that is, to facilitate innovation from the ground up, which is where we're going to get some of our most significant and beneficial results. And great, this may be a micro view of it. And most of today has been spent on the macro view, particularly on the resourcing side and not necessarily the requirement side. But the question that I thought of by reading the story of Corporal Kim is have we done enough to create a culture of innovation throughout the department? We're a department that is as effective as we are because we have a very strict hierarchy that we expect to be followed. We have, statute that demands that it is followed, and in the execution of critical missions, we expect immediate obedience to orders and are somewhat rigid in how we go about our day-to-day business to achieve the successes that we like to talk about. That ain't innovation. Innovation is a lot of imagination and hey, what do you think about this? So and General Dana, I'll ask you to start because of the stuff that you were able to accomplish in INL. Is have we done enough to create the necessary culture of innovation throughout the department to be able to leverage all the capital that is there and available for those ideas that look to deliver promise to future warfighting capability?
Yeah, Odie, that's a great question. I think the first challenge is, I'll just speak for the Marine Corps, but it's a pyramid. And I think the way we look at the pyramid now is, generals are on the top and then everybody else is kind of down here. I think we need to turn the pyramid on its side, because the old guys at the end here, you're going to drop off at some point, and all the intellectual energy and creative energy back here and to the left. And I think for the young ones, the biggest frustration, you said, is a lack of a venue to action their ideas. I mean, they do know about Naval X, NSI, and DIU, and these are really great organizations, but when they're buried down in the battalion, it's tough for them to kind of move that ball forward. The other thing I'd say real quick is, at least with the innovation team I was blessed with at Headquarters Marine Corps, some themes to keep something like that alive is you got to keep it small initially and resource starved. because if you start throwing a lot of people and money at it, everybody else kind of, whoa, what's that? And they'll attack it. The antibodies will come out. And then behind the scenes, you need a really senior level sponsor. And we had General Walters, who was later the assistant commandant, who was an electrical engineer by trade and understood the technology. So he was always a great advocate. But you almost have to lead from behind and be very stealthy about how you're moving these things forward. Because I think one of the other speakers said is, this sounds like a new idea. It's not good. I mean, it's going to get attacked. So why change? Yeah, which is ridiculous. So thanks.
Yeah, let me just.
Alex, thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on General Dillon's comments here. The reason why I serve and the reason why most people serve is because they want to have an impact, right? They put their life force into something that will make a difference. And when you feel like you can no longer have an impact and that you come to work and you want to serve your country and you can't take your talents and your passions and put them into something and you don't feel like you're really moving the football down the field, well, then you go elsewhere, right? And you go onto the private sector to have an impact from another way and serve the community in some other capacity. And so in that particular way, look, what we've done in the innovation ecosystem over the last 5 years is a great start. What Naval X is doing, what AFWERX is doing, what Army Applications Lab, right, in the 75th Innovation Command and ARCWERX and all the other innovation units. There is a cultural change and it has started, but it really needs to scale in a very meaningful way. A huge portion, I think what Dana put a finer edge on his points there is, right, what is the incentive structure? Look, at the general level, they have problems that they need to solve. At the airman soldier, right, at the very lower level, we're passionate, we want to have an impact, and we want to take our citizen soldier and citizen airman skill sets and all of the capacities that we have and put our passions and talents and aptitude into helping the country and to help solving these problems. You have the middle layer in the Air Force, we call it the frozen middle, right? This layer of bureaucracy that the way we have structured in the incentive structures with the primes, the incentive instructions with startups, the incentive structure for just airmen and soldiers and everyone in between, we have to revisit that. Because for someone in the middle, look, we believe in the Air Force, this whole cultural change is the airman on the flight line, right? Or the soldier out in the field understands the challenges, but also understands the unique and great opportunities to improve, much more than someone who's been, at the Pentagon for 10 years and kind of out of touch. And so how do we capture that? How do we do the problem curation, that solution discovery, leveraging commercial technology, leveraging academia, leveraging our FFRDCs, the whole repertoire that we have? Let's buy what we can. Let's build what we must. But that frozen middle, what is the incentive for that contractor at some program office to take a risk? Like if they fail, they're out of a job. If they save $1 billion, they maybe get a plaque and say thank you, which is all most people really need. But we really need to change how we go about that. And when many of these generals, they come to Silicon Valley, they go to Apple, they go to Google, they go to Facebook, and how do you do it? And I remember Elon Musk is someone has a great idea, write him a check for $50,000 and just give it to them, right? And he'll go to other engineers and go, how would you change? If I gave you the keys to the kingdom and you were king for the day, what would you do? And he goes, if they really don't have this great idea that's just off the wall and they're not really pushing the edge, I thank them for their service and they find another company to work for. and part of it is we want to accept this risk. We're in a zero fail mission. We cannot fail. And so how do you change that dichotomy, creating the safe space to be able to do that? There's a lot more that we can do to create that incentive structure, those safe spaces, and scale what we are doing because we have to move faster. So just to put a finer edge on what General Dana was saying, completely agree.
Dr. Pearlie or Captain Van Buskirk?
I'll go ahead, Doctor.
Oh, thank you. I'll say, I just want to echo two things that Lieutenant General Dana and Stoickey said. The first is top cover and having that high level sponsor who's going to give you the freedom to operate and do very unique things. We're really lucky. AAL wouldn't exist if Army Futures Command hadn't stood up. And we're fortunate to report to Lieutenant General Todd, who's one of the deputy commanding generals, right? So we have some freedom to maneuver. because of that. And that is so critical to what we do. You know, the second thing is AAL wants to work itself out of a job, right? We want to create business processes and procedures that make the Army a better business partner and have them spread out across the force. So you don't need us anymore. And I'm struck by one of the quotes that one of our Army partners said, which is, you know, when I started on this, it required me to hope. And hope is not an acquisition strategy, right? So in some ways, it's educating all of these people in the Army about that there are different ways to do things. And they might seem a little out of the box and they might seem like something you're not used to, but they do have the potential to be successful. And the ability of some of those Army stakeholders to take that risk, to go on hope, is incredibly encouraging, and we certainly hope that attitude spreads.
Yeah, just one quick comment for me, and I'll say that's a great comment there on where to take risk. And right now what we're doing is literally passing the risk off to the warfighters. And so what do we need to do? It really reminds me of a conversation I had as a fellow, multiple CEOs we got to talk to, but I happened to have an hour with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. And he just said it really loud and clear. He's like, look, everyone wants to have an innovation cell. Everyone wants to be cool by association. But if you want to change, it has to change at the core of the organization, the core of who you are, and it has to be led from the CEO. Period. And I can't tell you how many executives I saw say that it absolutely has to be a core thing. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive this change. And I think that's our vision. Is it would be great if this became the core, and then we could all bow out and say, great, mission accomplished. We've changed this culture. But the support from the top is absolutely critical. And then the last comment I'll say is, are we doing it? Are we right in culture? I think we're getting there. We have a culture, and as a warfighter, as an three-time FDNFer, there is a ton of leaning forward in the straps, tons of risk-taking, good risk-taking, and our leadership encouraged it. But I think something happens where as you get it farther away from the tip of the spear, and in a combat environment, you know, the risk metric just changes. But it is something that we can work on. And I'll just say the last point I'll say on this one is I had a lieutenant tell me, you know, and why this is so important to fix this is she goes, you know, if the Navy were more like Naval X or AFWorks or DIU or one of these things, I wouldn't be getting out. And most of my other junior officer friends are saying the same thing. I've had multiple tell me, so they're leaving the service because we can't get this culture right. So it's a must win. We got to get there. That's it.
Okay, thanks. So keeping on the subject of a Corporal Kim, the next question comes along to if I'm the unit leader of the unit that Corporal Kim comes from, I'm very interested in developing that capability set. But you know who else is? The Microsofts, the other companies that are out there that aren't associated with the military. And so now we need to keep an eye on the Corporal Kims of the world to make sure that we manage their careers correctly, to provide them incentive to stay, and really to allow them to mature within the organization. You know, getting to developing the core needs to embrace innovation. And you do that in a lot of instances from growing from within. So, you know, to each of you that has experience in spearheading this for your organizations and that have overseen it, what's the talent management strategy to be able to keep our innovators around? Because in the department, you're not going to get rich in the Department of Defense as an employee, either government or uniform. So how do you manage the talent? Because you've got to get beyond the reliability of, well, they're doing it for altruistic means because they love to serve their country. So how do we manage that talent to make sure that we can keep it around so that the culture of innovation is facilitated by those who truly embrace it? How about we go to you first there, Captain Van Buskirk?
Yeah, sure. So this is, obviously HR has been something that's been very passionate for me, because coming as a SecDef fellow, I go and do a startup on the OpNav staff, and now I'm here, and they said, well, you know, you're a unicorn. We have all these fellows that go in the Navy, at least, and you go to command, do a fellowship, or go do a tour with industry at these amazing companies. And then what happens? You just get put back as a cog in the machine. And so we really need to figure out, I think completely change how we look at HR, because, you know, in industry, you would never do something like that. You put the right people for the right job, and we still really have an industrial mindset in how we manage our people. So, you know, I don't have an ideal solution, but what I am thinking is, you know, we need to at least as an institution go, look, we understand we're here to make commanding officers and we're here to make future flag officers, but there is a place for those innovators, okay? And I know Safi Bacall, the author, had a great idea of creating like an innovation special forces, right? Maybe you take folks that, hey, they were a command, but they're not going to happen anymore, or even better, those lieutenants who are like, I don't want to wait 30 years to be a partner. I don't want to be a squadron CO. I want to go in and shake things up. There's no path for them right now. And so we absolutely have to figure out a way to incorporate our real creative thinkers and our innovators, because you can't have an organization succeed without those folks disrupting it. And I do think that's where we are right now. We have a handful of us, but once again, not at the core, not nearly enough. We're hemorrhaging too many people. And so, another great concept that came from Safi Bacall is he said, you have organizations function as like at water and ice, just like physics, right? And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a place right at 32 degrees where the molecules can move back and forth. And like we need to find those people that have the skills to go, I can understand how things work in the big bureaucracy, but I also understand how things work in the creative, innovative side. Have those champions and get them working back and forth. But the bottom line is I really do think we need to fundamentally rechange how we look at how we manage our folks and find places for these the people that don't just fit the mold of what the organization needs for command. And it's a much bigger challenge in the combat arms, or the unrestricted line, as we say in the Navy. I think the staff course kind of figured it out, but we need more folks to be supported from the system and not just be a cog.
Anyone else?
I'll just throw this out real quick. Those are great comments. I think, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but how we reward enlisted Marines, to me, we don't hit the target correctly. And where I'm going with this is, why can't a sergeant like Corporal Sergeant Kim go to Monterey, like Gunny Smart is now? We do actually have a couple enlisted getting advanced degrees at Monterey. But if you take enlisted and it turns into an incentive, and you send them to top level, not top level schools, great schools like MIT, Berkeley, Stanford. I mean, as a young enlisted person paying their way as a reward for the way they're thinking, and to learn more about the trade, because warfare is art and science. So, teach them a little bit more of the science, and they'll figure out the art because they're skill sets. Then the second thing is, this is kind of off the wall, but it's the reward mechanism. So this wasn't my idea, it was my sergeant major's, but back when we had 371 in Yuma, we would send small detachments out. If the Marines did a good job or came up with a great idea. Like one time we sent them out to an attack sub Navy. Now think of the coordination it takes to get 5 Marines on an attack sub, okay, out of San Diego. But what I said to the sergeant was, you got to figure it out. We're not going to give you any staff help. You got to plan the whole thing yourself. But what that does is it teaches them at the pointy end. I think Stoickey said this, is the future fight is going to be even more decentralized. As much as we're trying to centralize it and control everything, it's going to be atomized to a degree. And at the very pointy end, the Army term mission command, ours, maneuver warfare, mission type orders, that's what we need to inculcate, is that spirit of kind of acting on my own when I don't have a lot of guidance. So nothing on the audience doesn't know, but something I'm passionate about.
I think it's also getting away from this paradigm shift that everyone has to be the commandant of the Marine Corps. Everyone has to be the chief of staff for the whole Air Force, right? The number one in your service branch, right? And be at that level. And obviously the education and the career path in order to accomplish that is very rigorous. And you need to hit certain milestones and certain gates to have the breadth of experience to be able to do that. But that also delegitimizes or devalues, right, that corporal or that airman or that soldier who is able to create a solution and code or right, is able to find a new alternative solution. And that skill set, that aptitude, should also be rewarded. And there should be a different incentive structure by which, look, we don't always have to be the leader of, right, and that 4-star general. And everyone, like literally everyone in the Air Force has to follow the exact same pathways in their leadership structure and the things that they need to accomplish, when that's not the case. And many people have no desire to do that, and they get out in order to reward and be promoted and have a very fulfilling career. That paradigm needs to change. because there are other people like myself. I am taking the road less traveled, and I am not on a path to becoming a four-star general, nor do I have any desire to do so. And that's the majority. They just want to have an impact. They just want to be able to give back and serve in that capacity. And so looking at that incentive structure to what is that career path for even someone like me? I am very much of a rogue agent. It is hard. I mean, innovation is not for the faint of heart, especially within the DoD. And so that is just one thing that I would say is changing the paradigm of the incentive structure, that not everyone has to be the leader of your service, that we can value those other skill sets, and rank or promotions, or someone who came out of MIT and they're starting out and have those kind of capacities, you should be rewarded for that and those talents.
One comment real quick. I'll say we have an E6 on our team, and said he's a total rebel. Needless to say, the Chiefs can't stand him. But he helped design. He's the best coder we have, and he helped design so many things for us. Helped put together and architect our SIPRNet Confluence site, so we could actually collaborate on the high side. So we actually have enlisted folks, and if anyone knows of it, is enlisted here or has enlisted folk that wants to be part of the Naval X team and do a rotation, we'd love to have you. So I'll throw that out there. Hugely important. But yeah, got to get the incentives right. Yeah, the E7s don't like it at all.
So I agree that we absolutely have to get the incentives right. But I also think we can't cluster our innovators in the same organization within each service, right? Because then we're not spreading that mindset throughout. So how do we ensure that individuals who are maybe on track to be a flag officer get a rotation in an organization that thinks agilely, that thinks differently, that has a spin on innovation, so they can take the lessons they learn and apply it elsewhere as they move through their career? So I think there's two aspects of it. How do you foster the people that have those unique ideas and who just want to make a difference? And then how do you make sure that everybody in the service gets this new perspective?
Okay, great. Thanks. We have just a couple of minutes left, and having a strong desire to end close to on time because the happy hour follows. I'd ask just in closing to go around the horn and two quick things. What are you most excited about? And what is your biggest challenge? So we'll go Casey, Nuts, and then Stoickey, and then General Dane, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, great. I get to go first. What am I most excited about? I'm actually most excited about the work we're doing on problems right now, because I'm getting to watch these great innovators from the commercial space bring completely new ideas, and get to watch our Army stakeholders realize that there are so many other approaches to solving their problems than they ever thought. And it's really fun to watch those conversations happen. What is my biggest challenge? Reliably moving capital at the speed of business. We've done it once, but we almost broke ourselves in the system in the process. And while I think we can do it again, I think it'll be hard to award 15 contracts in 30 days, right? So how do we create standardized procedures and get the infrastructure in place to make that a much more normal occurrence instead of a talking point I throw out that makes everybody's eyes go big, right?
I'm next, right? So what am I most excited about? Honestly, Mike Brown being nominated to go up to OSD, that sends a huge signal, all right? And so all of us, as soon as we saw that, we're like, yes, all right? So it means the administration gets it and changes in the air. So I'm really excited about that, and just what I'm hearing with the administration on figuring out a way to get this right. What am I most concerned about, or biggest challenge? I think it's China. I mean, let's just say it, because you know what, the enemy gets a vote. And if there's one thing I learned becoming in my year as a strategist, is we tend to look at our capability roadmaps against ourselves. Look, the red gets a vote, and they're moving really fast. So that's what I'm concerned about. We have to go not only look internally, but we have to keep pace with our threat.
Yeah, I'll start with the biggest challenge is to take what we have learned over the last 5 years within the innovation ecosystem and scale it. Scale it in a very massive way that we have not done up to this point. My excitement is Mike Brown. The fact that they take an outsider from Silicon Valley who had no DoD experience, spent a couple years at DIU, had a tremendous amount of impact, and now is going to to lead all of acquisition and sustainment for the whole DoD. And his mandate is to scale. And so that is my excitement of what that future is going to become, the relationships that we have, that we've already started to build within, civil society that had eroded and just hadn't existed for quite some time, and where it's going to go. I'm super excited about scaling and what these next, 3.5 years are going to look like.
Those are great comments. So what's to me most promising, and the panel reflects this, is the youth and the talent that we have in the military and supporting the military. Because I came in and signed the papers in '79, I'm a dinosaur, came in 82, and just and there were great people back then. They were tremendous, but the caliber of the people we have today in terms of how they think and the questions they ask is just brilliant. I'm going to cheat. I've got two things that concern me. First is the process we talked about to move ideas to capabilities at scale. I mean, we've got all these great organizations represented here, but when I mean at scale is at a very, very large scale. And the second thing is, and Ben, I think, touched on this, is we still have a military that's a reflection of the second industrial revolution machine. And it's just large conscript armies, policies that don't match. And we need a 2.0, like DoD 2.0. What would that look like? If you were going to design the military today, not knowing what you had, what would it look like? And I'm not sure it would, well, I am sure it wouldn't look like what it is today. So thanks for the opportunity today, and thanks to the panel members for all those great comments. Thanks.
Okay, well, Dr. Perley, Captain Van Buskirk, Colonel Goldberg, and General Dana, thanks very much for your participation today. I guess in the back of my mind, I'm waiting for someone from America's Future to come back on the net to take over the mic. But with that, there we go. Hello, gentlemen. Thanks very much. We're done here. Absent any questions that you have, and to everyone, thanks again for your participation, and what a terrific conversation.
Well, I tell you what, Colonel Opdorp, let's thank the panelists as you just have done. But just as importantly, we want to thank you. That panel was outstanding. You were outstanding, and what a great way to wrap up today's American Future Series, our National Security Pitch Day. You were above and beyond. So thank you, and enjoy the happy hour upcoming shortly.